Hi there, folks. Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and I am picking up after like a month of hiatus doing these live stream videos. I was on vacation for a couple weeks, and then it was the 4th of July, which fell on a Tuesday, and that's when I record these. So I guess that's 3 weeks. Somehow, I think it was 4 weeks. Anyway, I am doing the thing again where I prioritize a relatively recent question, although given that it's been a month, it's actually not that recent anymore. But somebody, I believe it was in our Slack, asked, how do I build a marketing funnel below the following that I've built on another platform? And specifically, that platform is dev.to. So, for those of you that don't know, that is a technical community site that skews sort of newbie, beginnerish, but there are people creating content of all sorts on that site that is software engineering related. And so, the person here was asking a question that is basically I joined that site, created a lot of content there. I've built a following, but now I want to kind of build a marketing funnel for some consulting that I'm doing for an offering. How do I make that work? And I will speak to how to do that in general if you've built an audience on another platform, especially like a community contributor type blogging platform. So I won't make this specific to the site dev.to. I will talk a little bit about that site at times, but this isn't a video that's intended to address the subject of I've built an audience on dev.to. How do I proceed to create my own funnel below that? But just in general, I've built an audience on some community site or wherever it may be. The point here is you've built an audience on another platform that you don't control. How do you go about turning that into marketing for a business? So the first thing I'm going to say here, and I apologize, I don't want to be that guy, but I can't stress this enough. If you can go back in time, don't do that. So if you're watching and you have yet to build an audience on a platform that isn't your site, don't. I mean, there are some exceptions here. If you want to go be a YouTuber, there are some platforms that are less unfortunate to primarily audience build on than others, but there is no substitute for building an audience that comes to a website that you own and can instrument with any kind of tools that you want and completely control. So if you're talking about a community site, say like a dev.to, it's not that there's anything wrong with going onto that site and participating, but a community site of that nature, they could go out of business. I don't think they will, but they could change the rules of posting. They could make the platform paid membership. They could shadow ban you. They can do all sorts of things that you have no control over. So if you are audience building and depending on a third-party platform for your leads and things of that nature, it is a risk. And that risk is kind of in proportion to the stability and history of the platform. So I don't, for instance, view building a YouTube following as particularly risky because that's been a fairly stable platform over the course of a bunch of years, and you can definitely do audience building there. It's unlikely Google is going to cut YouTube and it'll just go away. Now, you can be subject to the vagaries of their algorithm or whatever. They might make it harder for you to get new viewers or things of this nature that you don't control. But you're going to be subject to that to some extent anyway. Google can also make your life miserable via SEO if they decide to deprioritize your site for search. So to some degree, building on another platform, it's risky, but not all platforms are equally risky. I would say dev.to is not a particularly risky one in the grand scheme of things. It's been around for a while. It's well segmented in terms of the audience. I don't really see them making moves like nerfing your content for whatever reasons, but it is something that in general I would not recommend doing. What I would recommend doing instead is building content primarily on your site and then using these other platforms as satellites. So for instance, I mean, you could use YouTube to host videos, but like if you're making videos on YouTube, I would also put them in frames on your site and really try to direct people more to your site and have your YouTube channel and following be, say, a secondary way of acquiring leads and followers. Likewise, if you are in the developer community and you want to post content on dev.to, by all means, go for it, but put it on your site first. There are some exceptions that I won't get into. SEO focused content can be a little weird for syndication. Topic for another day. But I would say in general, you want your primary focus to be your site and then to repurpose or distribute content in other places as a satellite effort. And that can work fairly well. So for instance, with Dev.to, back in, I want to say 2019, I joined that platform and I just took something like 50 articles from my site, deadtech.com. And once a week, I just syndicated them onto Dev.to. And I built a following that I want to say is in excess of 5,000 people on that platform. Now, I do think probably a decent amount of those followers were people that already followed my blog and just happened to be on Dev.to. So I don't think this is 5,000 brand new people, but certainly some of them were new. So you can, if you sort of cooperate with the community and abide by their guidelines and everything, you can use your site as the primary engine and also make some good headway on these other platforms. So I'll get off my soapbox about that, especially because it's not super helpful if you're saying, hey, I already did this. I acknowledge that maybe it wasn't in retrospect what I would have done. So I'm not looking to beat a dead horse, but for anybody watching, if you don't yet have an audience, strongly favor audience building on a platform that you control, such as your own website. The other thing that I'm going to say about this by way of caveats in the beginning is if you went to a site like Dev and you just started writing about whatever struck you as interesting and people found you interesting and followed you, it can be very hard to build any coherent marketing funnel below that audience. And I have a lot of experience with this because what I did with my site, deadtech.com, for about, however many years, I guess it's been about 13 years ago, I stood up the site. I just used it to kind of blog about observations. This is just, here's my life. I'm a software engineer and then a consultant, all the different things I've done. It was just me blogging because I like to write. And over the years, I don't know exactly how many people DeadTech peaked at with its following, but I believe it was in the tens of thousands. And that's an awful lot of people who share nothing in common per se, except an interest in following my ramblings and musings. And, you might say that the audience skews heavily software engineer or something like that, and that's probably true. But, are they all the same kind of software developer? Maybe in the beginning they were. I used to blog a lot about .NET, but then I kind of diversified and generalized what I was posting about. So that started to fall away. And my audience didn't necessarily have too much in common. I mean, maybe that they're all software engineers. So the problem with this is, let's say I had written a .NET or a Visual Studio plugin, for instance, and then I said, okay, I have this thing that I built and I want to go out and court an audience of potential customers and do lead generation. This is very simple. I'm going to write articles about .NET and about Visual Studio and that type of thing because I want to segment my audience to the kind of people that would buy the thing that I'm selling. If, on the other hand, you just go onto the internet and you create content and people gradually over the course of time accrete and come along and find this interesting, you haven't set out with any purpose other than to rant to the world. So you had no reason, just like I had no reason ahead of time, to think at all about the segmentation of your audience. So what you wind up with is building a following of people that find you interesting. Now, when you're talking about building a funnel below those people, usually this comes up in the frame of mind of, wow, I have, 25,000 followers. I know that that's valuable economically in some way. And if I went off on my own, I know audience building is hard. And hey, I have this audience that a lot of people would kill for. I ought to sell them something. Well, now you have this fundamental problem because there's nothing they all have in common other than finding you interesting, which means that the only thing you can really naturally sell to them is more of you. So you stand up a Patreon or you put out one of those things that says buy me a cup of coffee and, donate on PayPal or whatever. And that's kind of the sum total of what you can do. And what a lot of people are going to do, in order to build on this, if you become convinced that hey, I've done the hard work of building this audience, I can now monetize it. You're going to do a series of things that frankly are, not the best from a marketing or content marketing perspective, you're essentially going to try to flail around and hawk them stuff and stand up affiliate links and all these things, chasing the promise of passive income or whatever the case may be. The problem is that you have fundamentally built an audience that demographically, psychographically, et cetera, doesn't really have anything in common because you set out with zero intentionality. It's very hard to retrofit an offering to an audience you built with no prior purpose in mind, to the point where I would suggest you don't even bother. It's not to say that you can't develop an offering and then socialize it with that audience. By all means do that, but your uptake on it's going to be extremely low, because if you've built this audience, the way I did by just like ranting about different things in software, and then you go to them and say, hey, by the way, I'm now doing management consulting, who's interested? It's only going to be a tiny sliver of the population that's interested. If they like you, they probably won't begrudge you trying to sell them stuff, but you're probably not going to have a lot of uptake on an offering. So you have to choose between trying to find and hawk something to all of them that they might have in common, or just accepting the fact that you've done a lot of work of audience building and you're not going to have a very high conversion rate among your audience. I would go with the latter. I wouldn't try to become a huckster and sell them just whatever you can sell them. So having said that, I think those are two very important caveats for the rest of the advice that I'm going to give. So let's get into the actual advice. So you're on Dev, or more generally, you're on a community site and you have this audience. And over the course of time, instead of just audience building, you've decided that you have a service or a product or something that you want to offer the world. What can you do at this point to take advantage of the existing audience that you've built? The first thing that I would do is look into all the different tools of that platform. So for instance, when it comes to Dev.to, you might not know this, but they are rolling out, I believe it's in beta, a paid offering where you can get, Dev has this notion of organization. So you can go onto Dev and create a branded organization, and then different people from the organization can post there. But they're going to roll out a paid version of this where you can get access to analytics and some marketing automation type things, get insights about your audience, promote things, boost content, etc. The reason I'm mentioning that is because people may not know that about Dev. It's brand new, but there are some things that you can do to make it more like having your own site. So for instance, why does this matter? If you have your own website, one of the things that you can do is when people land on your website, you can do what's called pixeling them, so that you can retarget them with advertising on other platforms, paid in-app ads, or retargeting on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. You can do that if you've built an audience to your website. You can't go retargeting people if you've built an audience on Dev.to or some community or something, unless that platform allows you to do so. So your very first stop is to inquire, kick the tires, schedule a call, whatever, with the platform where you've built this audience, and they, may be interested if you've built enough of an audience. See what they can offer you in terms of supporting you building a marketing funnel and trying to sell on their platform, boosting your content beyond where it already is, helping you gain followers, helping you get insights into your followers, so on and so forth. There are probably things that you can do on that platform. So step one is take advantage of the platform as much as you possibly can. Step two, make a plan to pull people off of the platform and onto your site. So if you don't have a site, if you've just been creating content on somebody else's site, start your own site. Then go take all of the content that you have created on this other platform, assuming they don't somehow have intellectual property rights to it. Go take all of your content, put it up onto your site, so it'll be in both places. If there's an SEO play here to be had, this is a bit of an aside, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. See if you can make your new site or your existing site the canonical source, and set the content on that other platform to point to it and canonically link to your content on your site. So go create the infrastructure to have all of this content on your site. Migrate it. I'm not saying take it off of that other site, but have it in both places. And you're going to want to transition to considering your site as the primary source of any new content and existing content, and that site, Dev.to in this case, as being a satellite distribution channel. Now, this isn't to say that just the existence of content on another site is going to pull people off of dev.to. They're on that site reading content there and interacting for a reason. They like that site. So this is just laying the groundwork. The next thing that I would recommend doing is, in as much as you can, and it's not awkward with whatever community you're on, go, if you're interlinking between articles, like last week I posted whatever, go change those links to go back to your site. You want to, in a gentle way, encourage people to get onto your website. Once they're there, you can pixel them. And the thing that I would do, because you're taking people from another platform, bringing them onto your platform, you don't want to do this in a sort of scummy way. And here's what I mean. Like, let's say I'm used to your articles on dev.to linking to other articles on dev.to. Suddenly I click on one and it's taking me off, onto your site. Now you've pixeled me and you can start remarketing to me. If you're going to do that, remarket to me with articles on your site. So instead of trying to remarket to me by selling me something where I'll be like, okay, this one time I accidentally clicked on this site and now you're advertising to me. I kind of hate you. By the way, this is what I get for following you. And don't do something like that. Try to remarket to them with another article or something gentle on your site. But you want to get them into the habit of being on your site. So that's one way you can do it. Pixeling, some people don't like being remarketed to. Some people block it in various ways, so it might not work. I would consider other ways to incent people to visit your site more and more. So one example is if you have, 5,000 followers on this platform, when you post content, so first post it to your website, then a week or two later, post it to the platform that you've been posting on. And then you could make a mention. And if you have followers, they will be somewhat sympathetic to this. When you start syndicating content to that platform, you can say something like, hey, by the way, I'm really trying to get a following on my website. So it'd be great if you went over there and subscribed to my RSS feed or, whatever the case may be. Come check out my website. I'd love that. And if you like my content, I'm actually going to be posting it there a week or two before I post it here. So if you want to see my newest stuff, that's where you want to do it. So give them some kind of incentive to go and visit your website of their own accord and perhaps, sign up for it, sign up for a newsletter or something like that. Speaking of newsletters, that could be another incentive. So you could create a newsletter. If you're going to do this, I would suggest not doing the sort of tired thing that people do that worked 10 years ago, but probably doesn't work now, which is like subscribe to my newsletter to hear my latest update. I mean, they can hear that by reading you on dev.to or on your blog. So if you're going to have a newsletter, make it something like curated content or tips and tricks or, something of value that you only give to your newsletter, or, maybe you publish it after the fact on your website or something. I'm not going to get into the details, but encourage them with something of value to them, something that would be interesting. Encourage them to get onto your site and follow it. Encourage them to get onto your site and sign up for a newsletter. You want to gradually encourage. I was referring to this in the beginning as like pulling them off the platform. I'm not a huge fan of that turn of phrase that I came up with. I'm using that because they like the platform and you're trying to convince them to do something else, but maybe entice them off the platform would be better. Give them a reason to leave the place where they're comfortable and come follow you to this other place. So that is all important. I'm not going to keep rattling off tactics for that, but the gist of it is this: create a website and produce content in parallel with the platform where you've built an audience, and then figure out various ways to entice people to come to your owned platform. And once they're doing that, you have a lot more options for trying to market and sell to them. Now, in terms of the platform that you've built this audience on, I would maintain a presence on both in parallel. You already know that platform. You put in a lot of work, so don't just abandon it, or don't threaten the audience and say, I'm going to stop posting here in 3 weeks and only post on this other thing. I wouldn't do something like that. I would keep publishing in both places, but do your best to cut down on the amount of time that you're spending on this other platform in favor of the amount of time that you're spending on your own site, building your funnel and adding value there. I would still, especially if you have a lot of prior discussion and things going on in this community, I would still maintain a presence there. But I would de-emphasize that somewhat in favor of building up your own stuff. And you might eventually sunset your presence on the platform. Again, It's going to depend situationally on the platform itself, on how much you like being on that platform, and various other factors. So you're going to have to evaluate that. But I would unambiguously ramp up the time you're spending building your own platform dramatically, and ramp down the time you're spending building somebody else's on their terms. And it's nothing against these platforms. It's just I wouldn't, for the reasons I mentioned in the beginning, continue to have a marketing funnel that's heavily dependent on somebody else's, you posting at the pleasure of somebody else on their site. So in the end, to summarize, I would, absolutely set up your own site and think about how to gradually entice your followers off of this other platform and onto your own site, or at least to be following you in both places. That is something that you want to be doing. I would also, depending on the nature of this audience building that you've done, be prepared that most of these followers may not come along for the ride. And it's because, number one, they're on a platform they like and they probably intend to stay there. And number two, if you've just kind of audience built on here by being interesting or being a valued community member or whatever, you haven't set out from the beginning to build a funnel for an offering. If you're retconning an offering on top of an audience, a lot of that audience is not going to be super interested in that. But I would accept that. I would take an L on it. Socialize the offering with your audience. Do your best to get them to come along, but don't force it. Make sure that the offering is being offered to the subset of your audience for whom it is actually valuable. And the last thing I would do is build a marketing funnel by kind of flailing at whatever you think this audience of yours will buy. It's not a good look. It's probably not going to work. And if it does, it's probably just going to be like penny ante Patreon type stuff that you're not going to earn a living off of. So I wouldn't go that route unless you're just doing it for beer money. So I hope all of that makes sense and addresses primarily the question that the person here had in the community, but maybe this is helpful for somebody else who has inadvertently built a following. And by the way, this probably applies more or less to any social media platform. So if you have some kind of huge Twitter following, for instance, as that platform implodes or whatever's happening there, the same kind of reasoning applies. You're going to, if you have an offering that you didn't during the course of audience building, you're going to want to bring the audience along that you can for the ride into your new platform, your new marketing funnel, etc. Cut bait on the rest, and just try to entice a following and carry that audience over to a more proper place for it. And by the way, Twitter might be the epitome of illustrating the risks of building on somebody else's platform. Some eccentric billionaire takes over and suddenly. So if you take away nothing else from this, is going forward wisdom. Build on your own platform. That is the place for your marketing funnel, and any other audience building you're doing in other places should be either a hobby or it should be a secondary distribution concern for your business. So hopefully that helps some of you out there, and I will catch you all next time.